Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Demon's Touch, a reverse harem tale, by Dakota Brown, narrated by Chris Chambers and Mia Madison. Chapter 1. Ed. Oh, gods! I can't believe they stayed a week. Sophia groaned dramatically as she led the way to her magical grove. She had created it a couple of weeks ago when Doc had managed to help her access her powers on purpose. Ed watched Sophia walk, admiring the confident swing to her hips, the short bob she kept her dark brown hair in, knowing it framed dusky skin, brown eyes that probably flashed with their lavender magic, and an absolutely perfect aquiline nose. She held his older brother, Alan's, hand. A small part of him whispered he should be jealous, that he should claim Sophia as his, and only his. The other part of Ed, the much louder and happier part, was thrilled she had accepted his pack as her own, and was willing to share herself with all of them, that she wanted all of them. Ed told the tiny part of his mind that couldn't quite wrap around sharing Sophia to take a hike and never come back. Having Sophia's human parents around had been difficult for everyone. Even Victoria, Sophia's roommate and friend, had nearly snapped at her father a few times. For him and Alan, the hardest part had been to remember to keep their hands off Sophia when the folks were around. They thought she was only dating Doc. Doc had managed to evade talking about what he did for a living, because everyone knew Sophia's father, at least, would lose his mind if he knew Doc was also Sophia's teacher. That was awkward enough without having to involve the parents. It was bad enough that they thought Doc was a mage. Ed had no idea what her parents thought about him and Alan, and he didn't want to know. It had also become apparent that her father had some deep-seated prejudices about native people that Sophia hadn't known about. He wasn't exactly friendly toward Doc, who was half native, but he had stopped glaring by the end of the week. Ed thought Doc deserved a medal for not strangling Dan Collins sometime during the long week. A few times he had thought Sophia might try. They had stuck around so long because they were worried about Sophia. Ed got that. But they could have been a little less invasive of her life while they were here. Doc was the only one who had spent any time with her over the week outside of classes, and Ed didn't envy him at all, though he was glad Doc had been able to support her during the week. After the run-in with Alex and his family, who appeared to be the leaders of the local magical black market ring, Ed had worried Sophia's parents would take her out of school and move her home. Sophia made an easy target because she was a strong, untrained mage. Apparently, they thought they could force her to host a greater demon. Not only would that destroy Sophia, but it would give them so much power that they would be free to do whatever they wanted, including capture or kill Doc, Ed, and Alan. Fortunately, she had convinced her parents to let her stay. He wasn't sure how. Maybe Doc had used some of his vampire mind control on Dan and Beth Collins. He doubted Doc would admit to it if he had, though. That the guys had managed to rescue her, and Doc's promise to teach her magic, had probably also helped. Of course, Doc didn't actually know how to do more than a few simple spells, and by all rights, shouldn't have even been able to do that much. He would do his best, but they really needed to find someone else to teach Sophia. That led to other complications, but Ed didn't want to think about those right now, especially after he followed Doc, Alan, and Sophia into the pine grove, and the trees sealed up behind him. Sophia took a deep breath, tension draining from her, as she relaxed in the safe space. It was the first time the four of them had been in the pine grove together, and the energy of the place sent pleasant shivers up his arms and down his back. Alan looked down at Sophia. "So, what did you want us all in here for?" She gave him a wicked grin, grabbed his arm, and tugged him closer. "Maybe I just wanted my pack all together with me in here." She flipped his hand over and ran her fingers lightly over the 3 wolf paws tattooed on the inside of his wrist. Ed and Doc both had matching tattoos. Alan blushed, but stepped into her, sliding one arm around her back and the other behind her neck. She pressed her lips to his. Ed watched, still expecting jealousy to cloud his emotions. Instead, he felt peace. This was how it was supposed to be, his pack all together. Maybe they would have to see about adding a 4th paw to their marks. Alan came up for air, a grin on his face. "Is that really the reason? Or did you have something you wanted to talk about?" "No, that really was the reason," Sophia replied, eyes shining. "I needed to recharge after a week with my parents hovering over every move I made, and I wanted you all here with me." "By recharge, did you mean quiet meditation?" Alan's hand wandered lower, cupping her very fine rear, while he nibbled on her neck. Ed glanced at Doc, wondering how he was taking this. His pack brother had a faint smile on his face, as if amused but also happy. "Not exactly, but if that's what you'd rather do." She leaned back, and Alan growled and pulled her back to him. She laughed and held out a hand toward Ed and Doc, a clear invitation. Alan glanced toward them, eyes twinkling happily before turning his attention back to Sophia. She was quickly distracted, eyes shut, mouth opened slightly, as Alan's hands wandered. He hooked his hands under her shirt, and after a quick check to make sure Sophia was okay with it, he pulled her shirt off over her head. Ed's breath caught at the sight of her bare back. He curled his fingers, wanting to caress her skin. They had really caught Doc's interest. He stared intently, unable to take his eyes off of her. "Go," Ed ordered. Doc hesitated. "They invited us. You go. I want to watch." He was surprised that he did want to watch. He joined them later. "And if you're still worried about them wanting you specifically, you just need to get over that. Or do I need to drag you over there?" Ed smirked. Doc took a deep breath, and Ed thought that if he did actually touch Doc at that moment, he might get more than he intended from the other man. Ed didn't think Doc was actually into guys so much as he didn't care, especially when blood was involved. Doc had never really expressed any sort of interest before, but he certainly hadn't been upset with Alan or Ash when they had kissed him the previous weekend. Of course, Doc had been so high on Ash's demon blood, it was hard to say how the vampire would have reacted without it. Sophia had Alan's shirt off now, and she ran her hands over his muscular back. She dragged her hand over the claw scars that traced across his shoulder blades. Ed had a matching set across the back of his thigh. The marks had never gone away after the brothers had been turned to werewolves. Alan and Sophia noticed that they were still alone, and Alan walked Sophia toward them. They got to Doc, and Sophia snatched his arm and dragged him back to the center of the small tree ring. Alan glanced at Ed, and Ed nodded, saying he was still okay. Sophia pulled the 2 guys down to the ground. "Need to do something about the hard ground," she laughed. Apparently the tree ring was into Sophia's comfort. No sooner had she spoken than a thick moss that probably wasn't native to Colorado pushed up from the ground underneath all of them. Ed shifted and sank to his knees to keep his balance, as the thick carpet grew beneath his feet. Nice trick, Doc breathed. Sophia giggled, then gasped, back curving as Doc's hand slid down her belly. Ed shifted, pants growing tight, starting to think about joining the fun. Sophia moved so that Alan lay between her and Doc. She trailed her hand down his stomach. Alan groaned when she undid the top button of his jeans. Good? She checked in with Alan. He nodded, eyes closed. Ed caught his breath at the same time Alan did, as she slid her hand down the front of his jeans, sliding his zipper down and stroking. After a few minutes of watching Alan writhe in pleasure under Sophia's touch, Doc hesitantly ran his hand up Alan's arm and leaned over, his long hair draping over Alan's chest. Sophia must have disintegrated his hairband again. She liked his hair down. Doc had told him about that little trick of hers. Doc bit down lightly on Alan's neck. Ed's breath quickened. He wasn't going to be able to just watch much longer. He shifted his attention to Sophia, relishing the enjoyment on her face as she pleasured Alan. Alan's back arched, crying out, as Doc sank his fangs into Alan's neck. Sophia's look of pure satisfaction drew Ed to her. Time to join the fun.
Chapter 2. Sophia. I was starting to wonder if you were just going to watch, I said, as Ed sank down behind me. Strong hands gripped my waist and dragged nails up my back. Alan lay in front of me, content, breathing heavily, but with a sleepy, drunk smile curling at his lips. I groaned as Ed worked his teeth up my back, nipping gently, finding my ear and sucking at my earlobe. His fingers found the clasp to my bra, which somehow hadn't yet found its way to the ground. "Okay," he whispered in my ear. "Please," I replied. He unhooked the clasp with one hand, wrapped his other arm around my waist, and held my stomach, supporting me while I slid my arms out of the straps. Alan's gaze turned predatory, and I wasn't prepared for the intensity in Doc's eyes as their gazes roamed over me. I gasped as Ed fondled one of my breasts, squeezing gently. He pressed himself to my back and sucked at my neck gently. I leaned my head back against his shoulder, giving him access. Doc and Alan traded spaces, and Doc traced his fingers down my stomach. I moaned. "Looks like it's your turn." Ed beamed. "Thought I got to play with you this time," I gasped as Doc undid my jeans. "You first," Ed whispered. I cried out as Doc slid his hand into my pants. I was already soaked from my reaction to getting Alan off, and I tilted my leg to give him better access. One of them growled softly, and Doc's long hair brushed across my breasts as he leaned down and traced kisses across my collarbone while he rubbed. The pleasure built, tightening under my belly until I was begging for release. Doc slid a finger into me, and I cried out as my body responded. Once I stopped trembling, I looked at Doc, whose lips curled, pleased. Unfortunately, he was still wearing his t-shirt. Fortunately, it gave me something to grab onto. I yanked him forward, planting my mouth on his, not caring that I could still taste Alan's blood on his lips. "Guess she liked that," Ed purred as he fondled my breasts. I grinned against Doc's lips, and he returned my smile. Before Ed could get away from me, I twisted around in his arms and shoved against his shoulders, pushing him to the ground. I straddled him, leaning on his shoulders while he cupped my breasts. Moaning to let him know I approved, I shifted my hips against him. He let out a breath, hands tightening, then sliding down to my hips, holding me against him. "Now, if you hold me there, how can I get what I want out of you?" I teased him. Ed's eyes went wide. And I remembered that, while he was my age, he probably wasn't all that experienced, and he acted a bit shyer than either Alan or Doc. Not that I was super experienced myself, but I wasn't hesitant about exploring. Watching to gauge his reaction, I slid my hand down my stomach. His eyes widened as I slowly went lower. He whimpered when I dragged my fingers across the soaked front of my jeans and trailed further until I was reaching between us where I pressed into his hardness. "Want me to stop?" "No," he squeaked. "Good," I purred and lifted myself slightly so I could stroke my hand along his length. He trembled beneath me, arousing me further. I didn't want to push him if he wasn't ready, so I leaned forward and nibbled on his ear, much as he had earlier. "You want to wait?" I whispered. The others would be able to hear, but I could pretend, for a moment, that they didn't have super hearing. They had moved back, letting me and Ed have this moment together. "No," Ed replied after a slight hesitation. I rolled over onto my side, pressed up against him, leg hooked around his, and tracked my hand down his stomach, hesitating at his waistline. "You sure?" "Yeah." He sounded more certain, and I pressed my lips to his. He moaned, still kissing me, tongue exploring my mouth as I undid his jeans. He gasped, pushing against me as I ran my hand along his length. He shuddered, and I gave him a minute to get used to someone else touching him. "Good?" "Oh, yeah," he breathed. I purred in pleasure as I stroked him. He clutched my shoulder, thrusting against my hand. I couldn't hold him down by laying on him like he could me, but I kept my leg twined in his and kissed him until he was gasping. He grabbed my arm. Ed, we're all going to have to take showers anyway, but it's up to you." I nibbled at his ear. He released my arm, met my eyes, and nodded. It didn't take much before Ed was clutching at me hard enough to bruise my arm as he shuddered in release. I lay next to him, cuddling him. Doc spooned against my back, breathing against my neck, hand on my shoulder so as not to intrude on Ed's space. I propped myself up on my arm, thinking we were done for now, but Doc tightened his grip on my shoulder. "We're not done with you yet," he growled, voice low. His tone did things to me that made me not want to be done, ever. Twisting around to face him, I smirked. "Bring it. I intend to." Despite everything we'd already done that day, I blushed. Doc chuckled as he brought his lips to mine. It turned out werewolves recovered awfully fast, too, and we were thoroughly worn out by the time I let everyone out of the pine grove and we headed to the cabin, showers, and food. Chapter 3. Sophia. "Was that always so beat up?" Alan sat next to me on the couch as I turned over the knife I had taken from Alex's house the night they had kidnapped me. "No, the handle is all cracked now, and the blade actually looks like it is cracking too. I blocked a magical attack with it. Before, it was pristine. Very sharp." I tested the edge with my finger. "Still sharp." I winced and sucked on my thumb. "Can you fix it?" Ed came over and sat down on the other side of me, squeezing me in between them. He nuzzled my hair for a moment. Doc came out of the bedroom wearing flannel PJ pants and drying his hair with a towel. He leaned against the wall, watching as I fiddled with the blade. I spared a quick moment to eye his lean but muscular frame, especially admiring the way his pants perfectly molded to his hips before refocusing on the knife. Maybe? Probably not, but I could try. Intrigued by the idea of poking at it with my barely usable magic skills, I pushed a little magic into it. The blade sucked up my power. Huh. The guys stayed quiet, watching me as I pushed more energy at it. It's like it needs me to do something, but I'm not sure what. Lavender motes danced along the blade and sank into the crack in the hilt. The blade obviously has, or had, some sort of magic, or it wouldn't have been able to block that spell. I fiddled some more, moving the magic around, playing with something in the blade. Yeah, I don't think I can fix it. I shrugged and pushed one last time with my magic. Yelping, I tossed the knife away from us as magic flared. Ed threw himself across my lap, pinning me to Ellen, who was also trying to protect me. Doc had jumped in front of us and held his hands up, the air shimmering with a shield, one of the handful of spells he knew how to cast with borrowed magical energy. In this case, my magic. Doc swore. I tried to free myself from the tangle of werewolves and peek around Doc, but Ed was still convinced we were under attack. "Ed, Alan, let her up. I think it's safe." Doc dropped the shield, and I finally managed to crawl free of the wolves. I came over next to Doc and couldn't resist putting my arm around his bare waist. But the body on the floor had most of my attention. What the hell? None of us spoke after that, studying the person that had materialized out of the knife, however that was possible. The body was definitely male, had olive-toned skin and shoulder-length hair. I couldn't see much more than that, though his features didn't seem to be Caucasian. He wore some kind of long, divided brocade coat thing lined in fur. His boots were leather and of a style I didn't even recognize. If it wasn't for the large blood stain on the back above his kidney, the jacket would have been really nice. The stain looked fresh. "Is he still alive?" I managed to say around the shock. That got the guys moving. Doc knelt next to him. "Barely. Sophia, come here. See if you can help me heal him." "Me?" "I know the basics. I just usually don't have enough magic stored up to do more than take care of a stubbed toe." "You sure you're not a mage?" "Just been around a while," Doc muttered, clearly distracted as he rolled our guest onto his side. I sank down next to him and offered him my wrist. Doc glanced at me and smiled. "Let's see if I can guide your magic first." "Okay." "Just put your hands on him and call on your magic and see if you can follow what I'm doing." "Sure." I hoped I wouldn't cause whoever this was to die, because I had no idea what I was doing. I put my hands on the stranger's arm and called on my magic. I poured it into the guy. Lavender sparked across him, and blue sparkles rose to join them. I nearly lost my concentration in surprise. "He's a mage," Alan exclaimed. "Looks like it," Doc replied tightly. He put his hands on top of mine, and I let him direct my magic. We sank deeper into the unconscious man's body. The wound pricked at me, as if leeching energy from anything that touched it. Not only had he been stabbed, but he'd been poisoned, too. Doc showed me how to use my magic to repair the wound, and then he withdrew from the connection. "He's going to need more than that to recover," Doc said. "That poison is nasty, whatever it was." "Are you going to save him?" Alan sank down next to us. Doc sighed and pulled one of the beaded bracelets off of his arm. He wore identical wide bracelets on each wrist. They stored a little magical energy, giving him an extra edge against mages in combat. Not that the half-vampire normally needed much help, unless he was also defending others. They had been his mother's, a Navajo vampire hunter at the turn of the last century. "Suppose we should try." Doc's energy changed as he let his vampire half take over, and he bit down on his wrist. Vampire blood had a lot of nifty qualities, one of them being that it could help heal the poor sod on our floor. It wasn't well known, and vampires preferred it that way. They were one of the more powerful supernatural beings, and one of the more reclusive. Blood welled on Doc's wrist, and Ed rolled over the guy and tilted his head back. Though the wound was slowly healing, the guy's life force faded as the poison worked. The moment Doc's blood hit the guy's system, a jolt ran through my entire body, transmitted from the injured guy. He sucked in a breath, shuddering as Doc's blood helped me combat the poison, though he remained unconscious. For a few moments, I wasn't sure it was going to be enough, that we were too late. I poured more magic into him, determined to save him, though I had no idea who he even was. My hold on my magic weakened. It was only in the last couple of weeks that I'd even tried to do anything on purpose other than fix my hair, and I still didn't really know what I was doing. I lost my grasp on the lavender motes of magic and collapsed across the newcomer, trembling with exertion. Doc pulled me into his arms, and I shivered. Were we too late?
No, I don't think so, Doc replied. Ed, Alan, see if you can get him into my room.
Doc helped me to my feet and brushed a strand of my short hair out of my face. It stuck to my face, and my shirt clung to my body. Everything was soaked, as if I'd run a marathon in the Nebraska summer. Exhaustion tugged at me. Protesting when Doc swept me off my feet earned me a kiss on the forehead.
You're beat. Let me carry you. We'll get our guest cleaned up, and you can rest.
I rested against Doc's shoulder and enjoyed being held in his strong arms. So, does this happen often? Strange men appearing in your living room?
Doc laughed. No, unless I'm forgetting something. This is certainly a first for me.
How exactly was he in the knife?
Hopefully we'll be able to ask that question soon.
Doc put me down on his king-sized bed. When you shared with 2 werewolves, and now me, you needed more space than a queen allowed. He kissed my forehead and went over to the other side, where Ed and Alan stared at the stranger.
Let's see if we can get his shirt off and check his wound. We can see if Sophia got it closed up and check to see if it looks infected,
Doc ordered. Between the 3 of them, they had the stranger's shirt off in short order.
That looks like it hurt.
Alan winced, pointing to the guy's chest. A diagonal scar ran from his collarbone to the opposite hip bone.
Sword,
Doc commented, before gently rolling the guy over onto his stomach and looking at his back. We all flinched. The knife wound was closed, but whoever had stabbed him hadn't done it cleanly, and while the scar wasn't too bad, the person had done more than just slide the knife in. They had twisted it.
Wonder what he did to deserve that,
Ed puzzled.
Pissed someone off,
Alan replied. Doc put his hand over the wound.
It's not hot, so we probably got all of the infection, and his heart is beating normally now, so he'll probably recover.
He looks Asian, Ed suggested when they rolled him back over onto his back and covered him with a blanket.
Not quite,
Alan replied.
Yeah,
Ed trailed off.
Strange.
Well, whoever he is, I said, I hope he's friendly. He didn't look much older than the rest of us, though I knew that could be deceiving. The guys looked at me, then back at the guy on the other side of the bed, their expressions darkening from curiosity to suspicion.
Let's hope, Alan agreed.
I drifted in and out of consciousness, recovering from the magical exertion, while Ed, Alan, and Doc rotated, keeping watch on us. Warm hands caressed my cheek, and I opened my eyes. Ed pressed his lips to mine gently before whispering,
Alan and I are going to go run. If he's not awake by the time we get back, join us in my room?
His eyes shone with hope. I will. Ed's sky-blue eyes lit up with joy, and I couldn't help but smile. He kissed me again before leaving the room. Thirsty and wanting a shower after being drenched in sweat earlier, I got up. Doc glanced up from the tablet he was staring at, the light from the screen illuminating his face in the otherwise dimly lit room. "What you doing?" I came over.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?